morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for joining. At CIQ, we're focused on powering the next generation of software infrastructure, leveraging the capabilities of cloud, hyperscale, and HPC. From research to the enterprise, our customers rely on us for the ultimate Rocky Linux, Werewolf, and Apptainer support escalation. We provide deep development capabilities and solutions, all delivered in the collaborative spirit of open source.
Yay!
Good afternoon. Happy Thursday.
Yes, thank you. It is a wonderful Thursday. I agree. Happy Thursday to you as well.
Can you believe that we are like 3 weeks out from SC?
No, that's
It's so
totally
close.
amazing. Are you going to SC?
I am going, and I'm also excited. There's people on here that I haven't seen since SE last year that I'll actually get to see in person. So pretty excited about that.
Very exciting. So, if any of you out there are going and you would like to connect with CIQ, we are at booth 1855. So, definitely come by. And if you want to actually schedule a meeting so that you can grab one of our amazing experts and talk to them one on one, just let me know. Reach out on the website, and that email will come to me and we will get you all set up. So, that is very exciting. But today, right now, I'm sorry, are you still going off on that?
No, I'm not. My headphones cut out though, so that was fun.
Oh, did it? So I was like,
you were talking. I could see that you were talking. I was just hoping they came back by the time you finished.
Well, you faked it really well, man. You did
tried.
Like the traditional, like the man nod. Oh yeah, yep,
Totally.
yeah, whatever she's saying.
The man nod. So
the man nod. I'll give you that one. So today, we do research computing roundtables every now and then. I think probably like once a month, about ish. But today is cool, and I don't know, maybe it's just like the title, Storytime. I love Storytime. Like that is like one of the best. Maybe it's like from like being a little kid, mom came in or the dad or somebody, or maybe you made it up in your own mind, but like, the teacher sat you down and told you a story, and it's engaging and it's interesting, and there's always some kind of drama. So we're definitely talking about the drama today because we want to know from our amazing guests who are about to pop on here in 1 second, HPC disasters and how to recover and learn from mishaps. Because they happen. Don't matter how smart you are, no matter how much you planned, they're going to happen. So bring them on. Let's bring on our amazing HPC engineers.
There we go. I tried to invite some other people that have had some disasters that wanted to talk, but they weren't able to come today. So they were having disasters.
They were having their own disasters.
It's not funny, Gary. It's not funny. It's good to see all you guys. How is everyone? Excellent.
Doing well. Yeah. Really good.
Well, I know we don't have a lot of time with you, Alan, so we'll start off and kind of do quick introductions, and then we'll start off with you, if you don't mind, Alan. Tell us who you are.
Alan Sill. I run the High Performance Computing Center at Texas Tech University. We just had a case study published by CIQ, actually. And I co-direct multi-university cloud and autonomic computing Cooperative Research Center, Industry University Cooperative Research Center. Thanks.
And you will be at SC, and you will be doing a talk, I believe?
Possibly. We will have an announcement there of an event happening at Texas Tech that will be of interest to the entire community. But excellent. I can't say what it is until then.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Alan. Gary, good to see you again. It's been a while.
It's been a little bit. Happy to be back. My name is Gary Jung. I'm the Science IT Department Head at Berkeley Lab, where I manage the HPC program for the institution, and I also manage the HPC program for UC Berkeley.
Excellent. Jonathan?
Hey, thanks, everyone. I'm Jonathan Anderson. I'm a solutions architect here with CIQ, and I've been doing this HPC thing for quite a while. Looking forward to sharing some of the stories of the past.
Excellent. And finally, Forrest.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Forrest Burt. I'm a solutions architect here at CIQ on the same team as Jonathan. And my background in HPC is kind of from the academic national lab space. I was previously a sysadmin before I was a solutions architect here. A sysadmin on an HPC cluster while I was a student. So that was quite a time. We have some interesting stories from that, so I'm excited for today.
It sounds like a disaster in the making. It just does. Just kidding, Forrest. Just kidding.
It was always kind of in motion, you know.
Yeah, true.
It's academic HPC at small institutions. It can be a battle at times.
That's awesome.
Yes, because you're always trying to push, right? Like you just want to like, how much can this handle? So you find out. So Alan, I think did you want to go first and like do you have something on your mind, specifically a story that you want to share with us? I know you've probably got a few. Oh, Fernanda.
Welcome.
Fernanda, you got to introduce yourself.
Yeah, perfect timing.
I'm Fernanda Forder, and I don't know what to say anymore. I work with Ron now. I've been in HPC since grad school, 2006. So it's coming up to 20 years soon. God, I'm old. Okay.
Crazy how fast it's gone, isn't
it? It's so fast.
It's awesome. All right, Alan. You have stories and you don't have a lot of time, so we want to hear your disaster story.
Sorry, something came up for this afternoon. So I want to take you to a few years ago. I was just searching for some pictures to illustrate, but I can't get them up in time. When we had one of our snowstorms here in West Texas, the jet stream either blows north and you go running, or it blows south and you get snow. And we got a lot of snow. It was just after the new year. University was shut down, and we got feet of drifts in front of the my data center. I got to notice that things had gone offline. This was before we had our generator. Part of the moral of this story is how to convince your boss to give you that stuff you've been asking for to keep the disasters away. Okay, so I've been telling them I want a generator for a long time. This is how I got it. So all the power is off. It takes me, 20 minutes to dig out of my driveway. I drive on relatively okay roads, get there. Takes me a good hour to dig with the shovel that I brought with me into the only door I had a card key for. The next step is actually getting more access to the building. Get the door open. Everything is dark, but there's this really bad state in the machine room. We have a UPS, but I go in there and all of the batteries have been drained out of the UPS, and including the cache battery for the storage system. And the power is coming on and off every few minutes. As the building generator tries to reset, and there was some of our equipment that was on the building generator. Anyway, basically for all that time, we'd been turning on and off the power to a storage system with a drained cache battery. Jumping forward for the interest of time to the part where we brought in vendor consultants, and the expert said, I have never seen a file system come back from this level of damage. It was luster. We got to the point where we were doing bit level, I kid you not, bit level editing on LDISC FS configuration files, because that system was not under support contract. It was a home-built luster system on commercial hardware. So there's lots of lessons to take away from all of this. But the story actually isn't over, because it comes in two parts. So miraculously, after sort of managing this process and doing a lot of the stuff myself, we got like 99.9% of the home system back, and high 99 point somethings of the work system. I forget what it was. About 95% of the scratch system, which is enough to hose most of your scratch, but it's scratch. And that's one reason I have this current job right now, was resolving all that. We got the storage system put under support contract. We got the process started, which a couple years later got us a generator. But a year later, power outage right about the same time, not nearly as severe weather. The system goes down, it comes back up, and the file system is once again trashed. And well, I'll have to jump ahead just in interest of time again, but the end of that part of the story is the vendor who sold us the hardware initially admitted it was a bug in their controller that caused the initial problem in the first place. And they credited us several months worth of support contract costs, not quite the full year, and that I got flown into the next company-wide meeting to tell this story. So morals of this story, support contracts can be good things. They're no substitute for, you and the vendor actually understanding what's going on. Keeping the power on is by and large a good thing if you can manage that. Don't believe the initial diagnosis, even if it says you're hosed. And don't believe that the fix is a fix unless you've tested it. So that's as quickly as I can tell the story. With time and a beverage, I can make a much longer version, but I'll stop there.
It's fantastic. I mean, it's not fantastic, but it's a great story. No, there's a lot of pain involved in that. Thank you for sharing, Alan.
Yeah.
All right. Gary, I think there was a request for a story from Gary. I don't know if you saw that in the chat, Gary.
There is the JGI flooding. So this is actually Mother Nature pushing the limits on you guys. This is different than what I actually thought. But Gary, before you go on to it, I just want to say congratulations. You guys know, yes, but he received the 2023 Berkeley Lab Lifetime Achievement Award. So we are in the presence of greatness. Awesome.
Congratulations, Gary. That's awesome.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
I'm very honored by that award.
Fantastic.
So the JGI, I have to say that I only know about this secondhand, and but there was an interesting thing where and it goes to show you what happens when you don't have the right environmentals. But there was a large user facility who ran their own systems, and at one point something happened to the environmental cooling, and the room began to overheat. And so it didn't set off the smoke alarm, but the heat did set off the sprinkler system. So it actually sprayed the whole data center with water. And my understanding is that they ended up being able to recover from that. They took it and they dried it all out and then plugged it back in, and they were able to make it work again. But it was one of those things where they were like, well, there's no smoke alarm. There's like, what's going on? Like, why? And then it was just because of the level of heat had risen to the point that set off the alarm. But I don't, that's not a firsthand experience. But Greg had said, oh, we should talk about the time that happened. And he was there at the same time. And we had heard about that. Greg, Greg, are you online? You have anything you can chime in on that? No. So anyways, that was a pretty good disaster where we had done that. But I could share another one, but I'll let somebody else go. I could talk about like a complicated one.
I have another natural disaster one after Fernanda.
So at the lab, at Oak Ridge National Lab, this one time they were changing some transformers for the Summit project. And so they had to have more capacity for Summit. And I think it was Summit. Memory now starts to get a little fuzzy when you get older. And And so they had left one of the doors open from one of the big transformers that were out and back. And I think it was a raccoon got cold and instantly became ground, and everything went off, everything went offline, and there was an animal, I think it was a raccoon, that was simply kind of charred and still connected when somebody went back there to look what happened. The entire center was brought down because of that.
That's awful.
It's so bad.
Wow.
I've had a home got shut down because of a rat in the wall chewing all the
Ooh.
cord. But that was like the most delicate way I've ever heard anyone say it. And the raccoon got ground, and we're all, yep, we get what just happened. Oh, that was awesome and sad for the little guy, but kind of funny still.
I'm pretty sure I've heard of like squirrels doing that to sections of the power grid. And
Yeah.
I seem to remember like a site or something that tracks the rather large number of instances of large sections of the grid going down.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So mine's not HPC related, but I used to work and I sat in a data center and we had a freak thunderstorm that came up in Dallas and lightning hit the exact place where 3 different powers come into a data center. So 2 different utility providers providing from 2 different directions, a generator and a battery backup. It hit the exact place, like a 1 in 10 million shot, and took out all of them at the same time. And we were down for hours. It was very quiet and a little odd in the data center for a very long time until they could figure out how to restore power of any kind, generator or anything else. There was no way to take power from a feed and give it to the data center. It was wild.
Nothing happening.
Hours. No.
Oh man. So if any of you guys watching have a little horror story that you would like to share with us, please do in the chat. We would love to read them and maybe pop some of them up on the screen as well.
Jonathan,
Yeah.
you ever broken anything?
Never. So I'm a note taker, so I'm taking notes on the side of stories that I might relay, and I'm up to 12 now.
Oh, nice.
I'll start with this one, which I think is the most successfully provocative for CIQ. So we were a relatively early adopter at this site of, at the time, Intel's OmniPath fabric. And I never really felt confident in my understanding of what was going on, but my understanding is that early versions of the OmniPath kind of software stack, there's the native like verbs transport for how it communicates and how most MPI would use the fabric. But then there's also like an IP layer for normal network communication. So we were running both compute and our storage over this network. And it kept having trouble. There was something wrong with the IP stack, and every now and again, the file system would freak out and start expelling nodes, and we'd have problems. And we'd been through a few rounds of applying updates and trying bug fixes and things. And we thought we had it all sorted out. And then, of course, I think it was literally the day before Thanksgiving, the entire cluster started freaking out and dumping nodes again. And I remember sitting there, just sometimes I get outside myself and I'm watching the event take place and thinking how absurd it is that this thing that we've been working on for months is coming back up and causing problems just as we're trying to go on vacation. And as I was looking across the cluster, just double checking my work, I realized that all of the nodes had a random assortment of packages from the Intel OPA stack at different versions that didn't match each other or themselves all over the cluster. And at the time we were running the whole cluster statefully. We were provisioning things with Foreman and just applying these patches manually to the nodes, you know, with a big parallel shell or something like that. And that moment of realizing that the cluster was not in the state that any of us thought that it wasn't in any good consistent state at all, not only were all of the nodes different from each other, but they weren't even consistent within themselves because the installer just hadn't done a good job of being consistently applied to all of the nodes. That's what really got me on board with the idea that we should probably give that stateless provisioning concept a second look. And we built something ourselves at the time, but it's probably why I'm such a diehard werewolf fanatic today, because you want to know what state your nodes are in if you want to go on Thanksgiving break.
It's surprising that wasn't that long ago, that wasn't an uncommon problem with the Foreman line of things, that you would try to use the template and they would not always be the same.
This wasn't even really a Foreman issue.
Yeah.
This was, we had the nodes, and then we were just running the installer for the OPA software on all of the nodes. And it was early software, and it's trying to build some packages and install them manually by a script. But if you're deploying to several hundred or over 1,000 nodes and you're not noticing that some parts of it fail on some nodes, then things just end up in inconsistent state, and we weren't being careful. And you have to be careful if you're managing all this discrete state.
I had to build it was like 111 machines at one time, and I think we had 9 different variants using the same exact kickstart file. It was odd. Anyway, thank you, Jonathan.
Yes.
Forrest, I know you've broken stuff.
I definitely have, but I think we might save that for later in the program. I'll start with kind of the most institutional type kind of issue that I've been aware of. I will say I'm much more interested to hear all of y'all's stories. Mine are very, I haven't been in this industry as long as y'all, so I will. These are the few kind of interesting experiences I've had. One amusing thing was we were putting together a cluster at my last institution. Kind of like the big one that we'd been planning for the couple of years that I was there. And we were getting like procurement and ordering and doing all that type of stuff, and like trying to route all the different pieces and parts around and all that. We had kind of an odd situation where the cluster that we were building was actually like 250 miles away at one of the national lab sites, data centers. So we did not have, so this like major cluster that we had a ton of people on was not, we could just walk up to the data center or anything like that. It was, hotel, a trip, you had to go drive clear out there on a weekend, that type of thing. And we got this cluster ordered and immediately started getting, it was supposed to go to, basically directly to the site, and it wasn't supposed to go through like central receiving at the university or anything. But because of kind of one of those logistical hiccups in these old COBOL based systems, I imagine somewhere along the line, what we had start happening was all of the parts for the cluster began to arrive individually packaged in their own boxes at central receiving. And when I say individually packaged, I mean quite literally all individually packaged. Every cable in its own box, every hard drive in its own box. Basically every single like NIC component, everything we had, we were going through an integrator to have this all built, like basically secondhand. They were going to put the thing together for us and then hand it back to us, because it was just kind of a logistical headache to have the whole team out there for the extended amount of time it took to put it together. And so, like I said, it was supposed to start arriving out at the site, but instead we started getting all the pieces and parts that were supposed to be put together, each individually wrapped. And it ended up being like 500 to 700 boxes individually in the end that we had to thwart and somehow like basically get thrown onto a van and driven clear out to the site. And it was just, it was quite an interesting oddball. Like we had spent 2 years planning the whole thing, and it was just this odd like logistical headache at the very end of the whole thing.
Nothing like logistics to mess up 2 years of planning.
I know, right?
That happened to us, and we actually ended up naming the cluster IKEA.
There you go. Perfect. There you go.
I haven't seen it as itemized as that before, but instead I've seen it arrive at someone's house.
That's an interesting one. That's real interesting. So what happens to liability and warranty if it goes to something like that and it gets moved?
You just hope it doesn't.
Hope. Great. Gary, did you have another one?
Yeah, I have a couple of things where things went wrong. I do have and I'm kind of thinking about which one to talk about. In terms of disasters for us, usually disasters are for us is when we're out of production and we don't really have a timeline of when we're going to be able to get the system back online. And nothing is more nothing produces more anxiety than when you have a new system and it's not performing, and that's happened to us a few times. And so we always learn how to write better RFPs after experiencing something where you said, oh gee, if we just wrote that in an RFP, or they could have tested for this. But we had one large system from a tier 1 vendor. So I'm not going to name any vendors here, but it was a pretty large procurement. It was like about $5.6 million, and there were 2 identical systems going to 2 sites, and so one was going to one site and one was coming to our site, and the other site got their system up and running, and then we didn't, and we're like, oh, why is it that they can get this system running and why we can't? And there was a number of problems, but we finally did get the system going, and but then it wouldn't run LinPack. It was getting like 50% efficiency, and we couldn't figure out why that is. And how is it that we're only getting 50% efficiency? Like they have to have sold these before. Like, has anybody run LinPack on these things? And it turns out nobody ran LinPack on them, and then so they ended up like having to do a firmware fix. But essentially, this was like the early days of like when the Intel processors would go into turbo mode, and the basic problem was that they would go in the processor in turbo mode, but then at different times. So some would decide to go in, and other ones would decide to go out, and we tried things with the BIOS trying to lock it into full performance. It really didn't help. And so I think there's things you just can't take for granted, even if you're buying from a tier 1 vendor, that it's all going to work. And so we ended up getting that fixed. It was a big problem, figuring that out. Then once we got that to work, then okay, it would run fine the first time, and then when you rerun the benchmark, it wouldn't run. And then we're like, why is it that it would only run the first time and not the second time? You reboot the system and run it, and you do it again, and LinPack would run the first time and not the second time. And then it turned out that there was a memory problem with the InfiniBand card, and so again, another firmware fix, and to fix that. But so all this is going on, and this is like 8 weeks from the time we took the delivery, and so everybody's like looking at us like, why can't we get the system going? And then finally, then once we got the thing running, then we started to do our MPI test, and then we're like, hey, the latency we're measuring on the ping pong test, the MPI ping pong tests, are a lot longer than they specify online. And then so we met again with the tier 1 vendor and the InfiniBand vendor. We showed them how we're doing the measurements, and they all took notes. We were like meeting like every day at this point. And then finally what happened is they came back and they said, okay, you guys are right. The latency isn't as good as we advertised, and your numbers are the right ones. And so when they did that, then you look online, and all the latency numbers that they had advertised for that InfiniBand switch came off the web, and then they actually ended up giving us something else instead. But I think for us it was a disaster, just because from beginning to end we probably spent 10, 12 weeks trying to get this system going. But in the end, it ran really well. But I just cannot believe that, something is out there. You would assume that somebody has tested it, and you can't take that for granted.
Absolutely. And I have not thought about turbo mode in so long. When you say that, it makes me feel old again.
Yeah, so we write our must run in turbo mode consistently, all the time. But everybody's turbo mode differs, and then there's also very fine specs in the BIOS in terms of how much power is feeding to the memory and stuff like that. All of it actually affects latency down to the fine detail in terms of how fast it spins up. So even something that sounds the same between two different vendors may perform very differently.
Very interesting.
Thanks, Gary. Hey, Adam. Thanks for watching. One of our vendors got hard bit by AVX unturbo declocked on our Haswell base cluster during acceptance testing. It was something else.
Yeah,
I
I
say
think
that
this happened
a
to
little bit right?
everyone. That was pretty close. Yeah.
Thank you. Good thing you guys can read it. So,
that
Fernanda, I know
happened
that
to
you
every
were...
system that I saw come up around that time, just because no one anticipated the different clock speeds for AVX 512. But, sorry, Rose.
No, totally. You feel his pain. It's good. It's good. Fernanda, I think you had a few stories that you wanted to tell, but if you wanted to throw in there a little bit, you guys, I'm very curious because Gary, you mentioned anxiety coming up, and we all kind of deal with stress and dramas and traumas in the work, and something taking 10 weeks that should have taken a day. We deal with that differently. So if there's any fun little anecdotal, stories that you can tell about either yourself or other people freaking out, what they do when they freak out, I want to know.
It's going to get resolved eventually. I think that's the thing, is after you do these a few times, then you just have to tell yourself, okay, it's going to work out. Something we'll come up with something. I think there's a lot less of that now, because a lot more technology has converged so that people are using a lot of the same things. But at one time, people are using different interconnects, they're using different processors, they're mixing and matching stuff. And so I've heard someone say that every time you build a cluster is like serial number 0. Because it's just a brand new combination of things, including once you include the software. That's true. And so so you just have to explain to people as best you can that
breathe. You have to remind them to breathe, right?
Yeah. And then warn people that there's something of an art to doing this. What I was going to talk a little bit about is that if you're a small company and you buy a cluster and it's turnkey, that's one thing. It's probably going to work fairly well for you. But for anybody running HPC,
you have a disagreement here.
Anybody running HPC where they're getting systems over time, they have to integrate it into their environment. And then they're running their own stack. How they do things are going to be custom. So there's going to be a lot of unknowns once you integrating new equipment into an existing environment. So that's where it's really important to understand that and write your RFP carefully, so that this way you have some recourse
and pay for support.
Yeah.
Something I've seen is that nothing makes me more anxious during a disaster or when I'm anticipating something going wrong than when I'm trying to do it myself, or when I think that making it good or fixing the problem is all on me. And I think about this the most with a time where we were doing a storage procurement and it didn't go well. The vendor wasn't delivering in the way that we had written in the RFP, so that was good. But at the same time, the previous system was coming off of support, and it wasn't really possible to renew it, while the new system wasn't available to migrate data to. And I, for a long period, a week or two, was really anxious about what are we going to do. I felt trapped into this contract that wasn't delivering, because we needed somewhere to put data, but that also didn't seem like a good thing to move to. And then they just realized, we've got this whole team here, not even just the sysadmins, but this whole team of application specialists and other HPC people. When we just got into a room and we had a conversation, and the solution we came up with was, we've got the HPC Scratch system, and maybe it's Scratch, but at least it's under support, and it will be for several years. So we carved off a part of that and lifeboated the data onto that while we sorted out the actual campaign storage. And that's something I never would have considered on my own. And making it a problem that we were all there to solve really helped alleviate the anxiety around that whole situation.
It's a good one, Jonathan.
I just
All right, Fernanda. I know you have several stories
about the early days of turbo and hyperthreading was also a very controversial topic, because we had software level hyperthreading and then hardware, hyperthreading, and that was many discussions about whether or not those things should be left on. But the first job I had, we had to do an upgrade. So my company was one of the first adopters of Bright Computing's cluster management tool. I forget what it's called, but what was great is you could create these images and then you can deploy these images to the nodes. And that was like the easiest thing ever, coming off of what I was doing in college, which is using the old ROX cluster distro to update our clusters. So we get to the weekend and I have an IT counterpart, and he was originally like a Windows admin and then had recently, learned Linux. And so I was kind of helping him learn Linux, but also he had become quite self-sufficient in it, but he had a lot of experience in just the data center. So this is my first time walking into a proper data center, with real cabinets and real procedures. We drive, and we had moved the entire cluster to like Minnesota somewhere. I forget where it was. And so we're there on the weekend and we're trying to just essentially install the first commercial cluster I bought straight off of Dell. We had bought 20 nodes and we were putting it all together. And I created two networks. So one was like a gigabit network and the other one was an InfiniBand network. So one for compute and one for backend plus some file communication. And the InfiniBand one, the InfiniBand cards, this is the first time I'm seeing. So remember, I just come out of college, right? So like college was straight up Ethernet in a closet somewhere. This was like fancy stuff for me, and I had no idea what I was doing, but we were installing the stuff, we're putting it together, and every time we would, try to bring up the system, half of the nodes would drop, and we just could not figure it out. So we spent 2 days, I barely slept, trying to figure out why, and we finally figured out. Like we ended up I said, you know what? Let's just get all the serial numbers together, and maybe this is a batch thing, and a good job, young Fernanda figured this out, because I was like, maybe it's a batch thing. So I put all the serial numbers in a Excel spreadsheet, and it turned out exactly that there was like half of the batch was a set of serial numbers, the other half was another set of serial numbers. And what we figured out is, if you don't know about InfiniBand, the cables themselves have intelligence at the end of the cable, and those had a different firmware from the actual cards that had been shipped with the system. And so they were not communicating, and we would just swap a cable out and then put another one in, and we only had a limited number of cables. And then as soon as we moved this cable to another place, that node would drop off the cluster. So that was my first wow, this is a really fragile system to put together. And then when I moved to Oak Ridge, we're not doing 20 nodes, we're doing 20,000 nodes, right? So this is to put that machine together. What took us 2 days to figure out, 2 people in a room. Imagine that when you're trying to do acceptance on a system like that. And then the personal story that I had, the other one that was kind of short, is I was in charge for a little bit, about 1.5 years at Oak Ridge, to do the the software modules in the system. So, when you get to a supercomputing center, HPC center, you can do module add, right? Whatever your piece of software you want to run. And it was one of the first times where I had to recompile everything because we had an outage on purpose to do the upgrade, and then all of the drivers were updated and all the compilers were updated, everything else, system kernel, et cetera. And so I had to go and recompile the application. So I went to work and I stayed up until probably I think I stayed there all night. And then the next day people were coming in, and that day I was on call. And I was really clever. I had tmux. I had opened, 8 different windows. We had 8 different, I think, login nodes at the time for balancing. And so I was logged into 8 different nodes, and I was just building application in each of the nodes as I was going along. So make J dash, I think it was -8 that back then. Application 1's running. I've got lamps building here and something else building there. The next day, they bring the machine, and the machine has now been up since they released it to me. The next day, we say, okay, we're going to release the queues. Everything is going to come online. And not even 30 minutes in, and people are like, I can't log in. The whole thing is down. And we're trying to figure out what it was. And it turned out that finally somebody figured out, or one of the other people in the place, the support team figured out that I had filled up all of the RAM disk temp shares, or /temp, with all of my compiling and all of the artifacts, because I would stop in the middle of compiling and go oh, I forgot to make sure that this flag is on, and so I had filled up all of these sort of artifacts of compilation. All of the temp drives and all of the login nodes have been filled up with all of my crap. And then when people were starting to compile their own, they would run out of space, and then it would stop people from logging in. So that was my first. I really screwed that up. Stopped an entire HPC center until we could clean those up. So, but it turned out okay.
That's fantastic. I can't believe that it would let you. There are no limits or cleaning up after you. That's fantastic.
Well, there were limits, and I was cleaning up some things, but. But awesome. Not everything got cleaned up because I was stopping the make in the middle of it making.
Nice. Forrest, you came off mute.
Well, I'll tell this story. We were doing a little cable management cleanup. This is my story of messing up something at the HPC center. We were doing a little cable management maintenance one time on some of the systems that we had for this cluster, the original one that I was working on. And basically there was just a few different Ethernet cables that I had found that were it seemed like they weren't going anywhere. So I was able to kind of start tracing these back. I found a few of them. I got them unplugged, stuff like that. One of them basically just went into a gigantic ball of cables. And I thought I traced it out. There was no tag. Everything else had tags on both end of it. This is, whatever, the host name, that type of stuff. There was just one that had nothing on it. When I traced it back to the ball of cables, it seemed to just kind of terminate in this empty, just open dangling connection. So I was okay, I asked the sysadmin, can I just cut this one so I can pull it out from this end, take the other line, pull it out from that? And she's yeah, no problem. Cut that. And about 10 minutes later, I noticed there's a GPU 0 doesn't have any connectivity light on it. So I'm So I traced back the other end of the cable as I'm, trying to figure out, well, hold on, maybe I need to go, look at this a little closer. And eventually I figured out that the other end of it actually led back into GPU 0. So it was an easy fix. We were on Ethernet at the time for those. We didn't have those on any type of InfiniBand backbone. I'll qualify this and say this was when I was very new, wandering around the data center. But like I said, that was a pretty easy fix because we were just on Ethernet, so swap one cable for another.
Still pretty funny.
But it was. I just basically had to go. I was go. I just went to the chief sysad and was okay, so that was actually the cable for GPU 0. And she was oh, bummer. Thanks for letting me know. Go swap it out. Alrighty. So
Nice.
yeah, grand times.
Were those the actual words that she used? Oh, bummer.
Yeah, actually, yeah, she was very understanding. It was a good learning moment.
So
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. It was just her and I working for a long time. We also had like the incident where very early on when I was there, I went to go SSH into our head node, and I got basically no route to host. I couldn't get in on SSH, and I didn't realize that at the time, because I'd only been there for like a couple of months, that was like instant alarm. And about 5 minutes later, the chief sysadmin peeks her head in the room and was like, "Can you SSH to R2?" And she was like, "Oh." I said, "Oh, I was just about to come tell you. I couldn't get in just a second ago." And she's like, "Oh, well, that's not good. We need to go figure out what's up." And we found out in very, very short order that most of the downtown had lost power. But the problem was that because of how the data center was set up, something along the lines of like the UPSs could potentially stay on for a certain amount of time, even if the cooling went off. And so you could like overheat the center. Now, thankfully, after we raced down there and kind of did the fire drill to see what was up, the other sysadmin who was in the office next door to the data center had already shut the whole thing down. So thankfully he was there. But it was...
that could turn into a Gary overheating the data center and spraying water everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. We ended up there for like 10 hours afterward, because when it brought down the cluster, some of it wasn't on UPSs, so it brought down all the switches and some of the stuff like that. This was, like I said, a very small university cluster, so it kind of, we're doing what we could, keep things online. We lost like the switches and all that, and one of the switches had not had kind of the configuration saved in the way that persists after it gets power cycled. So the switch, when it got cycled, lost the configuration, and we had to go call the engineer who had previously worked for us and was working somewhere else to come be like, "What did you do with this switch that made it work?" Because it was him.
You'd be surprised for us how often that happens on switches. The configs don't get made persistent. It's crazy how often it happens.
Yeah, so we lost that, and that took quite a while to get back running. But like 10 o'clock that evening, we had it back going and outage resolved. That's my most interesting like natural power outage disaster type story.
Jonathan, you had 12. You have to be down to 11.
right.
Now.
What was this about a solar eclipse?
Yeah.
So my next story is entitled "When a Solar Eclipse Took Down Our HPC Center." So I looked it up. I think that this was in 2017, but there was like a full solar eclipse, and everyone was excited. And my wife was bringing my kids to the park that was across the street from my office, and it was going to happen like right over a lunch hour. So I was going to take off and head over there and watch the eclipse with my family. And just as I'm about to leave, Nagios blows up. It's saying not only that like the login, no one could log in, and we were getting alerts from within the cluster that parts of it couldn't talk to each other either. Like, what on earth is going on? And of course, the same way. Of course, it would happen right before Thanksgiving or right before I'm trying. It's always breaking right when you're trying to go somewhere. But I trace it down to DNS. Something's wrong with DNS. And we were pretty proud of our DNS infrastructure at that point, because we had managed to convince the campus IT department to delegate actual DNS to us. We didn't have some fake internal DNS domain that we were based off of, which a lot of HPC clusters, even at that scale, are. So I went and I got in touch with the campus DNS guy. I'm like, "Hey, something's wrong with DNS. What's happening?" And I find out they're also, logistically on fire as well. The only message I get back from them is, "It's because of the eclipse." And at that moment, I gave up. I'm like, whatever. There's nothing I can do about this. It's clearly not my problem. I'm going to go watch the eclipse with my family. Sure enough, we do that. I come back. When I get back, everything is fine. And yeah, exactly. What on earth could possibly be doing this? Find out that because we were using not only the campus DNS like name servers, or we were delegated from them, we had our own name servers, but we were using the campus resolvers to get back to ourselves. So we would use the real campus recursors, and then that would hit our own name servers. People live streaming the eclipse on campus had DDoS'd the campus name resolvers. And we had not considered that perhaps we would be even more able to stay up than the campus DNS infrastructure. So they became a single point of failure for us, and DNS went down for us, and we couldn't resolve any names, so nothing could talk to each other. So our takeaway from that was, even if you integrate with the campus infrastructure, still maintain your ability to operate without it.
So it didn't run on solar wind? Because I was hoping that would be the answer.
That's a different story.
I have another overheating story.
Let's have it.
Yeah, there was a time, actually it wasn't that long ago in the future where in the past where it was towards the end of the day, and there was a leak, a water leak in the parking lot. And so our facilities people came. It was at the end of the day. They're thinking, okay, what we'll do is we'll shut off the water to the building, and then we'll deal with it tomorrow. And so they did that, and then they left. And then it wasn't until about 1 o'clock in the morning that all of a sudden all of our alarms went off. And what had happened was that when they shut off the water, it also cut off the water to our cooling towers. And that was about the time, 1 o'clock in the morning was when all the water had evaporated out of the cooling towers, and then it affected our cooling. So nobody thought about that when they shut off the water, and it didn't occur until like several hours later. It was
that almost sounds like the old why do today what you can put off until tomorrow?
Yeah.
Just turn the water off. We can fix it tomorrow.
Exactly.
Love it.
I have one that's a college one. So in the early days of SunGrid Engine, this is not so much as a disaster for us, it was a disaster for the entire campus. So campuses have sometimes a condo model where a professor will get some grant money and then put in nodes into this center and this cluster, and it generally is it's sort of a homogeneous, they'll have homogeneous partitions. We figured out that if we used SunGrid engines, it was like some sort of like grid that would then spawn different jobs. We could beat the system that kept us from running too many jobs based on how much we had contributed to the condo model. And so one time, once we figured this out, all of the students in the group, which is about 12, 15, had essentially flooded the entire cluster, spawned all of the jobs, and beat the system because of the way that it was set up to keep us or prevent us from running all of the things all of the time. And it took them a little bit, before they could figure out. And all of these jobs were like 2-week jobs that were running, and nobody really noticed because a lot of them were named different things, and nobody really paid attention to what was spawning all of these different jobs. But set up your queues right was a lesson there for them.
College kids to game the system. It's always college kids.
Got to finish our degrees, man.
It's true. It's very true.
I have one more water one here, and
the theme with Gary. It's all about water.
Yeah, because the theme has been water since this fire sprinkler one. But down at UC Berkeley, the data center's on the 3rd floor, and they did that purposely, and because the previous one used to be in the basement of Evans Hall, and which seems like a safe place to put a data center. I'm sure a lot of companies would put their data centers in a basement, and it seems like a good place until somebody sets off the fire alarm and the sprinklers go off on all the upper floors, and then where do you think all the water goes?
It rains down. Wow. There's no, you would almost think they would have thought about that and put some sort of barrier so that if that did happen, it's a good idea.
I have flooded a 3-story home. This has nothing to do with HPC. It was a toilet and a cat. But that's for another day.
High performance cat.
Grounded.
It's a high performance cat. It's just sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And of course, looking back, you're like, oh, like all of you have these stories where it's like, oh, this happened. And then we figured it out and it was this, and you're like, oh, okay. Yeah. Like, okay, that makes sense. Similar type
Don't
of
flush a
thing.
cat down the toilet.
Do not flush the cat down the toilet. Also, do not flush the kitty litter down
Oh,
the toilet.
oh no.
I didn't
Oh, no.
know. And then I
Sounds like a
left.
really
Oh
bad idea.
It
no.
was so bad. It was so bad. And my aunt and it was my cousin and her whole family, they were out of town for like 2 weeks, and I was just supposed to like feed the cat and clean the litter box. And third floor up, I'm putting the kitty litter poop in the toilet and flushing it. It backs up and it starts to leak. Well, you don't have to go every single day. So 2 days later, I come back. I walk in her house. It's literally raining inside of her house, all the way down 3 stories out the garage.
Did you get invited back?
No,
No.
no, I have
curious.
been disowned. That was scary. Thanks for listening, guys. I wanted to participate.
Absolutely. Jonathan, we don't have time for 10 more stories. I'm sorry. We're actually up on time. We're going to have to do another one of these because I feel like there are a lot of stories to be told. So we're going to have to recycle this topic again.
And lots
Hopefully
of
by
good
then-
lessons too.
Yeah.
Lots of good
Hopefully
lessons.
by then this group doesn't have new stories to add. I hope everything stays smooth. Fernanda's laughing again.
Lucky for everyone, I'm no longer touching the keyboard. So
Wow. I would say congratulations, but I don't that
I miss it.
no.
Yeah, I know. I'm in that like really mid-career, having that existential like, do I want to do the up? Do I want to stay here? Do I want to go back to the keyboard? Are people going to believe me that I even know what I'm doing? Do I even believe myself that I know what I'm doing? I'm right in that, right in the throes of my mental health breakdown. Going back
I'm
to the
sorry.
mental health issues.
Mhm.
We believe that you know what you're doing, so don't ever
Well,
question
thank you. I
that.
appreciate it.
We know.
You keep allowing my video to be shown, so I think you do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Rose?
I support you
We're
getting
out
out
of
of management. Anyway, you guys, I am
Freaking
so
I
grateful.
love it though. I love my people. I love my staff. I know.
That's fantastic.
Okay, whatever you do, it's going to be amazing. You
I
are
appreciate
valued.
it.
You are valued wherever you go. There you go. There you go. So you guys, thanks for coming and sharing your stories with us. We have had absolutely so much fun. Thank you everybody for watching wherever you are at. Thank you for listening. If you are not listening to our new podcast,
That's right.
and we would love for you to like and subscribe and share and do all the amazing things. We'll be back here next week, same time, same place. We will be at SC 23 in Denver, Colorado. We would love to meet with you. So if you would like to meet with us, either come by booth 1855 or reach out to us on our website. Even just like the info at ciq.com, that will come to me and I will get you all scheduled up. You are amazing. We love you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.